Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our intergroup session on the evaluation and the revision of the EU Action Plan against wildlife trafficking. My name is Anja Hazekamp. I'm the president of the Animal Welfare Intergroup, and I will be chairing this meeting. Before we start, I would like to highlight some practical aspects for the running of this short session. The meeting is live streamed and will be recorded. It's live streamed on Facebook, and the video recording and the presentations will be sent to all participants afterwards, and they can also be found on the website of the intergroup. The debate will be moderated by Reineke Hameleers from the intergroup secretariat. Please keep yourself muted during this meeting unless you are given the floor by Reineke or myself. And you can add your questions in the Q&A box. They will be addressed at the end of the session. If you are an MEP and you wish to take the floor, please let us know using the chat box or raise your hand if the function is available to you. And given the short time at our disposal, I would like to ask all the colleagues to be brief as possible with your questions and statements. Let's go back to the meeting. The EU Action Plan against wildlife trafficking was published in 2016 and is now under review to determine its efficiency, coherence, and added value in terms of wildlife trafficking. And wildlife trafficking is defined as the illegal trade of wild animals and plants, their parts, and derived products. This trade severely harms biodiversity, leading to decline of species and potential extinction of some species due to the unsustainable extraction of species from the wild. And we are delighted today to be joined by Mr. Leonard Matthias Meyer. He is the team leader for the CITES and Wildlife Trade Regulation at DG Environment at the European Commission. And the Commission has made it clear already that tackling this form of organized crime is an EU priority. The objective of today's intergroup meeting is to understand from Mr. Meyer what the challenges and opportunities are in the context of the revision of the action plan. We're also very pleased that Ms. Ilaria Di Silvestre is joining us today. Ilaria is the head of EU policy and campaigns at Ivory, and she will tell us what the most important elements are to include in such a revision. We will first listen to both our speakers and then open the floor for questions and answers. And we will start with Mr. Meyer from the DG Environment. Leo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much to Anja Hazekamp and the intergroup for the invitation. I will, without much further ado, show you a short presentation that we have prepared on what's going on at the moment in terms of evaluating and revising the action plan. I hope that is now visible for everyone. If you can just nod or give me a sign that I can proceed. Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Very good. So maybe just let me start with a brief reminder what is in the current action plan, which, as was already mentioned, we have had since 2016. It is structured around 3 policy priorities, which are then broken down further into quite a significant number of particular actions. And I've listed the 3 priorities here: prevention, implementation, enforcement, and then last but certainly not least, there is an important global dimension to the action plan. I suppose most of this will be relatively familiar to to the audience. So let me proceed to a few comments on how we have so far gone about implementing the action plan. You will also be aware that this is not a piece of law. It's a non-binding communication that was adopted by the Commission, but that also has been benefiting from political endorsement from both the Parliament and the Council. The idea is for the plan to be jointly implemented by a number of different actors, starting with the member states, of course, since they have many of the relevant competencies. The Commission obviously has a role to play, and this refers not only to our DG Environment, but also to several others. And this includes DG INPA for development cooperation, DG Home for security, and also DG Just for the Crime Directive, most importantly. Beyond the Commission, other EU actors have also been involved in implementing the action plan, such as the External Action Service, the agencies that we have for police and judicial cooperation, as well as some more informal networks of practitioners which are active in this domain. And of course, given the global dimension of the action plan, there is also the need to involve international actors beyond the EU, such as the Secretariat of the CITES Convention and several others. So here we have listed a few milestones in terms of what has happened during the lifetime of the current action plan. This is not meant to be comprehensive. It's more like an extract, so to speak, to give a flavor also maybe to those who haven't been following so permanently. Quite early on, there was, I would say, an important achievement in terms of including environmental crime in the so-called impact framework, which is the policy cycle on organized crime that is coordinated by our colleagues in DG Home, and where the Council, of course, is in the lead. They have been focusing in that context on two forms of environmental crime in particular, namely illegal waste shipment and wildlife trafficking, indeed. Then also still in 2017, the Commission delivered on one of the important milestones in the action plan on Ivory with a guidance document that effectively suspends all exports of raw ivory. Later in the year, or actually I don't know when exactly in the year, but also still in 2017, there was not the only one, but probably the biggest chunk of development assistance that was assigned to work against wildlife trafficking from the funds that INPA is managing. And this went to the IQUIC consortium that some of you may be familiar with. Ivory, of course, has remained on the agenda. There was a public consultation also still in 2017, which gathered a lot of attention and very many responses. And maybe jumping ahead a little bit, you will see in the next but last line of this overview that finally, I would say, we are now just about to adopt a series of additional measures distributed across different documents that have been inspired by this consultation, among other things. The first and so far only progress report on the WAP implementation then came out in 2018. This can still be looked at. It might be useful also in the context of the evaluation now. And another new initiative that I wanted to mention, at least briefly, then between 2019 and the summer of this year, through the Internal Security Fund, we made possible work led by colleagues in some member states and also NGOs on specifically what we call wildlife cybercrime, and which actually also includes parcel services in addition to the internet. So that I think has been perceived as generally quite useful. Then coming to this year, there was an important element of continuity, I think, in the decision to keep environmental crime, including wildlife trafficking, in the impact scheme also for the next cycle. There is about to be, as I already mentioned, the adoption of additional measures on Ivory, and the proposal on a revised environmental crime directive is due next month, as far as I know. So now looking more specifically at the evaluation and the revision, I think most of you will be familiar with how this process unfolds, since we follow a relatively standardized pattern in the Commission. The most important thing to highlight here is, on the one hand, the public consultation that has been opened and is running until the end of the year. The link is here in the slide. In parallel to this, we are, with our consultants, also running a more targeted consultation of expert stakeholders. And this has been distributed also within the Parliament. If someone considers that they should have received it but haven't, then by all means, please let me know. Eventually, this will, of course, lead to a staff working document summarizing the evaluation results and on which the revision will then build. Somewhat untypically, while we normally say evaluate first, here we evaluate in the knowledge that the action plan will be revised, as this is a commitment in the biodiversity strategy. This has posed a bit of a challenge for designing the questionnaires that we're using in the OPC as well as in the expert consultation, as we needed to ask questions, both looking backward at what has happened until now, as well as anticipating what could or should go into the next action plan. I hope we have succeeded more or less in putting this together in a clear way. In terms of timing, you will also be aware that the biodiversity strategy foresees the revision for 21 already. This is not happening for a range of different reasons. Currently, we are aiming for next summer, both for the publication of the evaluation outcomes and the adoption of a new action plan. Until now, there have only been a few dozen contributions to the consultation, so we can really only give very initial impressions. But on that somewhat shaky basis, I think we can already say that there is still quite a lot of support for this kind of EU action. Also, probably not very surprisingly, the assessment of the implementation of the action plan is mixed. Where people consider that we have been successful in raising awareness to some extent, but maybe still not enough. Interestingly, perhaps the respondents so far tend to be more critical of the member states than of the EU in terms of implementation. This, for us, in a way, is comforting, but it's also not really reassuring overall. And there are still very frequent calls for even more cooperation, basically across and between all the different levels of governance. We also get a sense initially that the three priorities which I mentioned in terms of prevention, enforcement, and international cooperation, that they are still considered to be relevant. So to conclude, maybe more from a personal perspective than anything else, I've tried to provide a few pointers to what we consider to be the main challenges, but also hopefully opportunities for the revision of the action plan. In the current plan, we have already tried to firmly connect, let's say, the more classical work on species conservation and sustainable use also to the security dimension and to issues of good governance in the different countries along the trade chain. But we have now also seen additional objectives being brought to the agenda in terms of public health, obviously, not least as a consequence of the COVID pandemic. Animal welfare has always been somewhere out there, but it's not currently an official objective of the action plan. That remains to be seen whether how that unfolds. Also, in terms of the scope of a future action plan, I think there is a balance to be found and maybe readjusted in terms of whether the plan is fully focused on implementing what we already have in terms of relevant laws and policy guidance, and or whether it focuses also on potential new initiatives. Obviously, given the non-legally binding nature of these documents, the new action plan will not in itself deliver any new regulations, but I guess it's not inconceivable that it would sort of clear the path for some such initiatives. Governing the implementation of such a plan is also always a relatively complicated exercise. There have been calls already during the lifetime of the current plan for clearer rules and more transparency, maybe also in terms of how the results are reported. And this, of course, is a necessary basis for the monitoring. And finally, capacity issues always come back. This concerns, again, all the levels of governance, and it's about money, but not only, it's also often just simply about people who are working on these issues and who also have to deal with many other issues and are struggling to keep a tab on everything. So that's all really I wanted to say, and thank you very much. Back to you, Anja, or over to Ilaria. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Meyer, for this informative presentation. It is encouraging to see that the amount of work that the Commission is putting in on this topic and the possible outcomes that could be achieved. Reineke, are there already urgent questions from our audience, or can we go to our next speaker?
Well, we have several MEPs, Anja, who would like to come in, but I suggest that we first give the floor to Ilaria so they get the complete story and then open for the Q&A.
Perfect. Let's do that. So I'll now give the floor to Ilaria Di Silvestre from Ivory. Ilaria, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anja. And Thank you for inviting me today to participate to this important debate. So what I'm going to present today, sorry, I cannot, okay, it's progressing. What I'm going to present today is the result of a lot of emails and long video calls with all the organizations that you see mentioned here in the screen. So maybe we'll just close this, okay. And the result of all this consultation has been summarized in a joint position paper that will be submitted to the Commission during the consultation, and it will be also available for more details. So we identified together several key calls. Here I would like to present our 10 key calls for the revised action plan. And let's start by saying that the previous action plan has definitely been an important step forward. It has raised attention on this important topic and put it high in the political agenda. This was extremely important. And as mentioned by Leo, some important achievement has been done. But however, there have been weaknesses. And these have been affected the implementation of the action plan, the impact, and the resources that have been dedicated to that. So first of all, as already mentioned indeed by the Commission, there was a lack of clear monitoring and evaluation process. And this has made it really difficult to assess the real impact of the action plan. And also to assess which kind of resources have been dedicated to that from member states. There has been in general lack of dedicated resources from both member states and the Commission, and insufficient integration into the new and existing legislation. We all acknowledge that action plans are not legally binding, as was mentioned by Leo indeed. However, they could have legal teeth if they are fully integrated with the process of development or revising legislation. And this was not really the case in our view for the previous action plan. For instance, the revision of the Environmental Crime Directive is happening only now when the action plan is concluded. So we would like to see much more integration with the legislative process for the new action plan. And we think that the evaluation of the action plan should really build on the lesson learned from the previous one, and then address this weakness and ensure that there's a clear monitoring evaluation process, dedicated resources, and full integration with the new legislation in the new one. Importantly, we consider that the action plan should initiate a process to close the loopholes in the wildlife trade legislation. We need supplementary legislation to prohibit the importation, transshipment, the trade on wildlife that has been taken illegally in the country of origin, because all species that are not covered by CITES at the moment are legally traded in the EU once they are illegally exported from the country of origin. And this is an important loophole that needed to be addressed. We have been very glad to see that the Commission in its strategy to tackle organized crime is promoting, committed to promote a new UNTOC protocol on wildlife trafficking. We think this is very important, and particularly because the text under consideration at the moment is including a provision to address exactly the point that I mentioned before. So we really hope that this promotion of the new protocol and implementation of a new protocol will be part of the new action plan. Demand reduction continued to be an issue. This was an objective, an important objective of the previous action plan. However, this continued to be an important issue, and not a lot has been done, in our opinion, in that sense. We need implementing evidence-based demand reduction initiatives based on real behavior change studies. And in source country, EU support for the protection of wildlife from threats posed by the trade should be fully integrated in its wider development policy in order to provide, of course, viable, non-consumptive alternative to the local population. The precautionary approach, this should be, I think that the lesson learned from COVID clearly showed the risk coming from the trade on wildlife. So we need a real precautionary approach that should be fully embedded in the new action plan. And indeed, this is already in the EU treaty. So we would like to see this as a real part of the full process of drafting and implementation of the action plan. And this should include addressing the connection between the legal and illegal trade, because risk from for the health of people, for biodiversity, for animal welfare are not limited to the legal trade. The two, legal and illegal, are strictly interconnected, and the two must be addressed. We would like to see a transformative and precautionary approach adopted, as I said, and a real good example of that is the positive list approach to regulate the exotic pet trade, because this is where most of the trade on live wild animals is. The EU is a key consumer and destination for exotic pet. The demand is growing for exotic pet, so this is largely unregulated. And we see that the solution is the adoption of a EU positive list that harmonizes the different positive lists that a growing number of countries or member states are adopting. And this is really will be aligned with this precautionary approach, because it will only allow species that have been assessed to not pose a risk for health, for biodiversity conservation, animal welfare, to be traded and kept as pet. Wildlife cybercrime, well, there has been important work that has been done on that under the previous action plan. However, it continues to be an issue. Wildlife is sold online illegally, regularly still. So we would like to see the wildlife cybercrime to be given the same level of priorities as other forms of cybercrime that are threatening the security, health, education. We need increased capacity and resources to tackle wildlife cybercrime, both in terms of financial support, but also training for local authorities, and legally binding mechanisms to ensure that traders are obliged to demonstrate the legality of what they are selling, and a new guidance specifically on targeting the trade in wildlife online will be extremely helpful. And it's our understanding that the new Digital Services Act that is presently under finalization, include a provision that will allow the Commission to develop specific guidance on specific risks, like the trade in wildlife online. We still need to continue to fight against ivory trade. We are extremely pleased to know that the Commission is going to publish in the coming days the new rule to limit even further the trade on ivory. However, most of these new provision won't be legally binding. It will be only in a guidance. So we need a strict monitoring of the implementation in member states of this new provision, and this should be amended when necessary, closing gaps, including adopting legally binding provision to make sure that this is really the end of ivory trade. Hunting trophy is still, trophy hunting is still another consumptive use of wildlife that in a time of biodiversity crisis should be addressed. We would like to see extending the requirement for import permits to all species listed in Annex P of the Council regulation. At the moment, this is the case only for a few species, while there's no reason for that. And member states should make sure that what they import as hunting trophy is legally obtained and also is not detrimental to the conservation of the species. And the action plan should ensure that the existing regulation and guidance are strictly applied, adopting highly precautionary approach. And there should be consideration for further regulatory measure always supported by financial resources for an alternative, non-consumptive wildlife conservation and development strategy to really provide alternative, viable alternative to the consumptive use of wildlife in source country. The alignment of EU policy is extremely important. the action plan synergies and connection with policy, planning process, and international commitment should be improved. I think that never as today, we understand the meaning of the so-called butterfly effect, when something apparently insignificant is happening in a remote area far away, and then the impact is growing up, and then finally you have a huge impact in all our everyday lives. So this is exactly what's happening with COVID, and ambitious international commitment are necessary to ensure that this is not happening again. The One Health approach should be at the heart of all these synergies, connection, and international commitment. Indeed, to make sure that a real cross-sectoral approach is taken. Rescue Center are a key player in key actors in the fight against wildlife trafficking, and there was a specific action addressing this issue in the previous action plan to provide adequate care for confiscated live animals. However, very little has been done in that sense. And so we would like the new action plan to provide consistent and transparent reporting on all seized and confiscated live animals to CITES, Europol, countries of origin, financial support to Rescue Center, and improve the capacity for appropriate care of confiscated animals through the implementation of existing guidance, like the IUCN guidance, national action plan, training. And finally, our last point is to involve much more the civil society and private sector in the implementation of the action plan. We know that this will also ensure greater transparency in the EU processes. And the Commission already have a tool for that, that was developed by DG Agri to discuss agricultural legislation. These are the civil dialogue groups. So we propose the creation of a civil dialogue group under DG Environment, specifically discussing wildlife trafficking. And this would allow for participation of all stakeholders, more transparency so that all stakeholders are informed when there's something that is going to be discussed with member states, and they have the opportunity to provide their input in the process. And just to finish, so what's the role of the European Parliament in the action plan? Well, the Parliament had a key role in the development, in really initiating the process for the previous action plan, because this was started because of a resolution adopted by the Parliament in 2014. Then there was an ENVI committee initiative report in 2016 after the adoption of the action plan to provide recommendation for the implementation of the action plan. There have been initiatives, many initiatives from the MEPs for Wildlife group that was created really to support the implementation of the action plan with the collaboration of NGOs. And also a lot of initiative of this intergroup, indeed, that organized meetings, events, letters to support the implementation. So we think that the Parliament can and should play a key role in the development implementation of the new action plan. And for instance, starting with a dedicated resolution, providing its recommendation to the Commission. And of course, we NGOs will be very glad to support that process as we can. So thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you so much, Ilaria. I couldn't agree more, especially on the precautionary approach and the creation of a positive list. The Parliament and especially this intergroup has been asking for this positive list for many years now. Well, let's hope that the Commission will receive many submissions to the public consultation requesting all the issues that you mentioned and that they will be included in the action plan. Reineke, over to you to moderate the debate and make sure that all the questions of our audience are answered.
Yes, perfect, Anja, and we already got several requests from MEPs to intervene. If others would like to take the floor, please let me know. Firstly, I would like to invite Manuela Ripa to come in and ask her questions to Ilaria and Leo. Manuela?
Thank you very much, Reineke, for giving me the floor. And as Anja was clear in saying to us MEPs to be brief, I will be brief and I will just concentrate on my questions. But nevertheless, I would very much like to thank Mr. Maya and Mrs. Di Silvestre for their presentations. Mrs. Di Silvestre tackled a lot of points that are at the very much at my heart and of the heart of the Parliament. I mean, we addressed very well the action plan. And so, to be honest, I thought the presentation of Mr. Meyer was a little bit too broad and not concrete enough. So I would like to ask I would like to hear more concrete things. And my first question would be regarding the ivory trade. It was already also mentioned in the presentation of Ilaria de Silvestre. Can the Commission clarify when the long overdue restrictions on EU ivory trade will be adapted? The problem that we have at the moment is that most of the new provisions are not legally binding. Is therefore the Commission considering to include in the revised action plan a clear mechanism to monitor and evaluate their implementation by the member states? And the second question is, the unregulated exotic pet trade in the EU is a threat to health and biodiversity. We all know that. And the precautionary approach was mentioned by Ilaria and also by Anja. And so I'm asking, because I'm also in the International Trade Committee of the European Parliament, and I often brought this up, is the Commission planning to adopt the long-awaited EU positive list for exotic pets import in the revised action plan? And an overall better regulation of the legal trade on wild animals, because also Ilaria mentioned it, there's a big problem between legal trade and the illegal trade. We need to better tackle the illegal trade. So if we could hear, please, a little bit more concrete things on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Manuela. Could I ask Liu to come in first and respond to Manuela's question on the ivory trade and the EU positive list? And then Ilaria, a short reaction from you. And I would like to ask you to keep your answer short because we have 5 MEPs still waiting to intervene.
Sure, thank you very much for the questions. The easiest one is about the publication of the new measures on ivory trade. As I already indicated, that is really imminent now. I cannot give you a very precise date because the publication is not actually, the final button is not pushed by us in DG Environment, but all the procedural hurdles have now been cleared, and it's really only a matter of time. So we are counting on this to come out probably next week. It's true that this still relies heavily on guidance, although there are also some amendments to a Commission regulation that is relevant here. The monitoring will happen mostly through the reporting which the member states have to do both under CITES and under the EU CITES regulation on seizures of illegally traded wildlife. So that already by default provides some sense of how well we are tackling this problem. It's also important to recall that even if the guidance is, of course, not legally binding, it does have the support of all the member states, which is part of the reason why it took us so long to get to this point, that we really wanted to have every single member state on board, because this is necessary for the guidance to be effective. On the positive list, this is of course a discussion that has been going on for a while, and it is clear that it will come out also out of the consultation as a point that many people are paying attention to. Will this be in the new action plan already? I don't think so, frankly. Why? Because it is not something that we can do under existing legislation. At least we haven't found a lever which would enable us to do that without changes to the existing legislation. And this, of course, as you are fully aware, is not something that the action plan in itself can accomplish. So I think this will have to be, assuming that there is sufficient support, it will have to be a stepwise process of which the new action plan could then sort of kick things off.
Thank you so much, Leo. Ilaria, anything to add? Because I recognize that not everything Leo is now commenting also reflects the calls in your presentation.
Yeah, yes, maybe on monitoring on the implementation of the new rules on ivory trade. Our fair and worrying is that this new provision requesting this system of certificates that is pretty new, and we know it will be challenging for member states to identify independent expert to provide this certificate for antique ivory that could still be legally traded. So we consider that this deserves a specific monitoring effort, because otherwise there's a clear risk that the new rules won't be really effective. So we really call for that monitoring system, not just relying on the reporting obligation under CITES on confiscation, but really on the level of implementation and what is happening now with this new rule in each member state. We think this is very, very important. Concerning the positive list, we know this will be a long process because it will involve risk assessment and a lot of discussion with stakeholders. And this is why exactly we would like to see some starting of this process under the action plan, at least making risk assessment, discussing the issue with a stakeholder to initiate the process. We think this could be feasible under the action plan, and we hope this will be taken into account by the Commission.
Thank you so much, Ilaria. We swiftly move on to the next MEP, Martin Huysink. Would you like to come in, please?
Yes, thank you, Reineke, and thank you, Matthias and Ilaria, for the interesting presentations. I would like to take it from two slightly different takes or perspectives. One is indeed the online trade and the whitelist, and I think there is additional level on this, and it is whether what's the take on trying to utilize also the Digital Markets Act and Digital Services Act in making sure that the illegal trade in wildlife is restricted, and not just illegal, but somehow more stuff is illegal and it's enforced, because it's not only about what is now illegal. I think we need to be stricter, just like we are trying to push it for the puppy trade within these two acts. Second, I'm happy to say that, and I think this is of interest to many, that after a pressure that I started back in Slovakia, the Slovak Parliament in the first reading has agreed to the ban on private keeping of big wild animals, including tigers and lions. And why I'm mentioning that, and hopefully looks like, since it's a governmental proposal that will pass, that brings me to the key issue is, ivory is one thing, but we are exporters as Europe, often illegally, mostly illegally, of tigers and their parts. And I'm seeing lack of action on this front, and whether the Commission would consider proposing and pushing the member states to come up with a proper European ban on tiger trade. Because when we have individual member states banning it, it's toothless, because the result is, well, it goes through the countries which are not having such a ban, because we cannot restrict the trade within the Union. So I'm wondering if there is going to be more action on the tigers and other protected and wild animals that sadly are being, bred and harvested, to put it really brutally, in Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. And I would like to also add that Tilly Metz, who had to leave us, also stressed that cybercrime should be a priority for the Commission, and she asked what the Commission is planning to do on this in the new action plan. So this also links to Martin's questions about the Digital Services Act and how to better regulate the flourishing online trade in legal and illegal species. So Leo, you're very popular today. Would you like to come in and answer those questions, please? Also on the tiger trade, of course.
Yes, thank you. Good questions indeed. Maybe starting with the cybercrime. This does not provide a real answer, but I can at least report that the linkage to the Digital Services Act is on the agenda of the next meeting of the CITES management authorities from the member states that we are having also next week. So this is something that we are, albeit perhaps rather late in the process, are looking into. I must admit I have not had a chance myself to follow that process, but I take it also from some of the colleagues in the member states that they see potential there. And for the tigers as well, we are having an ongoing discussion with the member states how best to tackle this. The initial idea was to go for another guidance document, somewhat along the lines of what we already have for Ivory and for rhino horn. In both of those cases, I think it has been shown that this can work, but then some member states, and I think they have a point, are a little bit reluctant to sort of multiply the number of these species-specific guidance documents, asking like, where will this stop? Would we then eventually have a guidance for each and every species or group of species that is in illegal trade? That doesn't look like a very neat way forward. So we're now in parallel to people working on the substance of relevant advice or rules. In parallel to that, we are also having a discussion more at the level of governance, like should this not rather all be transferred into at least the implementing regulation eventually. So that's where we are at the moment in that discussion.
Thank you, Leo, for that explanation. Ilaria, a quick response from you on this?
Yes, especially one comment on the Digital Service Act, because we believe that this is indeed something very helpful. There are very good elements there if they are kept after the process of discussion with the Parliament and the Council. Particularly, there's possibility really to have, as I mentioned, a specific EU guidance on specific risk, and we consider that the risk of the trade of wildlife online really deserve this kind of guidance. So it's something that can help, and there should be also possibility within the Digital Service Act to oblige the traders to demonstrate the legality of what they are selling before this being allowed to be sold. So that's but there are some important elements. Of course, now it depends how the process of revision and internal scrutiny will go. So we hope that these elements are taken, and we really invited the Commission to look at the opportunities that are in the Digital Service Act to make sure that these are exploited by the action plan.
Absolutely, and not wait till the new action plan, because the Digital Services Act is being negotiated as we speak. So good point there. Moving on to the next MEP, Jytte Guteland. Would you like to come in, please?
Yes, and now I can unmute myself. I can't, the picture is not possible. I'm sorry.
We can hear you.
Yeah, I think I think actually you need to allow me to be visual, but it's fine. I just wanted to say the same thing as my colleagues in this meeting, that I would like the Commission to have as a priority to agree that tackling wildlife cybercrime should be a priority, like many others have pointed out. I think this is the only way. We see that today the online crime on this is growing, and that's the way also to finance criminal activities in the society. And this is harmful both for wildlife and the society that these criminal people work in, so and do other crimes as well. So I think the European Union should have this as a priority, and I would like to encourage the Commission to do that. And I just support my colleagues who also mentioned it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jytte. Very good points. I suggest we also now invite Michael Viezik to come in and ask his question, and then have a last round of comments from our guests.
Yes, thank you, Reineke. I have just a short question, maybe that has been already touched upon by several of my colleagues already, but that puts the wildlife trafficking into the context of the organized crime. We know that the Commission's communication on the EU strategy to tackle organized crime for the term 2021 up to 25 stated that it would promote the adoption of an additional protocol under the UN talk with respect to wildlife trafficking. So my question is, what is the current situation? What is the European Commission doing or planning to do in this sense? And also maybe a follow-up question, whether there is something that could be covered in this regard by the implementation of the new action plan. Hopefully I'm not repeating myself, but yeah, this is something that I found sort of an issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael, for these relevant questions. And Ilaria mentioned the UN talk protocol already in her presentation. So Leo, would you like to come in on those last MEP interventions, please?
Thank you. I think I can be quite brief on these points. Very well noted on cybercrime. Maybe just to mention briefly that increasingly Olaf, so the Commission's anti-fraud office, is also involved in work on these issues, which happened relatively late in the process of implementing the action plan, but is of course very welcome from our point of view. The work on the UNTOC protocol as part of what the strategy against organized crime announces, that is being led by our colleagues in DG Home. So I'm unfortunately not in a position to inform you in any detail on where they are. But I take this to be the agreed Commission line, that there's support for the development of such a protocol. And these multilateral processes, as I'm sure you all know, they are never fast. So I'm not sure that a lot has happened since the strategy was adopted, but it's something that we will, of course, also be involved in when the process goes ahead.
Thank you, Leo. And a last burning question from Tilly Metz from the train. She wondered why rescue centers have not been supported and compensated so far, because they are really footing the bill of the legal and illegal trade in wildlife species. And there hasn't been a lot of support for these rescue centers. And there's also a huge lack of professional support for confiscated animals. For example, governments often don't know what to do with these animals. So do you think that this is a topic that can be covered under the new action plan? Maybe first Ilaria, and then Leo's final comments on this before we close this meeting. Ilaria?
Yeah, thank you, Reineke. No, I think this is really important. And there's an interesting question in the Commission consultation on the action plan that is something like, who do you think is bearing in a non-proportionate way the cost of the implementation of the action plan. And we think that the rescue center are, because they are really fighting, really a real support also in terms of knowledge on the fight against wildlife trafficking. However, they are completely lacking consideration, financial support, and also some, in general, promotion of the work they do. So we really hope that this will be addressed now in the new action plan, because it was a priority of the last one, but we didn't see, and the rescue center didn't see any effect for that. And then I don't know if I can make a last comment, or this will be later
10
on.
seconds. No, we will have to close. So please, if you want to
very quick one, just saying that more in general, I hope that after this COVID crisis, we won't continue as business as usual. I think the new action plan should really build on this lesson learned. And let's hope that this reactive model that we are perpetuating will change and will start to be a little bit more preventive and precautionary in the approach.
Absolutely, Ilaria, well said. The whole societal context has changed so much between the previous action plan and now. Leo, would you like to comment on the question on the rescue centers and maybe also make your final statement?
Thank you. Yes, just very briefly, I haven't prepared any final closing statement, but I've enjoyed the discussion very much and taken good note, as have some of my colleagues in the background. On the rescue centers, as I think Ilaria also mentioned, this was one of the actions already in the current action plan. We have made some efforts to, not least by actually taking the entire one of our expert groups on an outing to one of the rescue centers in the Netherlands, in the hope to generate some momentum there. But I'm sorry to say that, as interesting as this was, I think for everyone, it has not really overcome the resistance among, I think, most of the member states actually to for the Commission or the EU in general to get involved in this, which they consider for better or worse, considered to be none of our business. So that's a bit the situation. It may sound cheap to blame it on the member states, but that's at least the conclusion we have drawn so far. And thank you very much again for the opportunity to discuss this with all of you.
Thank you, Leo, and thank you, Ilaria. And I'm sure the debate about the future action plan for wildlife will continue. Anja, time is up. Sadly, I think we could have discussed a lot longer. A last a note from my side, I spotted in Leo's presentation that there is an increased political and societal awareness, but that is not strong enough. So please, everyone who is following this webinar, do fill out the consultation. You can do that still the 28th of December, because we know this topic is very important and close to many citizens' hearts. Anja, over to you for the closing remarks.
Yes, thank you, Reineke. Well, I will be very brief because, as you said, our time is up. To conclude, I would like to start by thanking both speakers for today's informative presentations and the constructive debate that followed. I'm looking forward to see how the public consultation on the EU Action Plan against wildlife trafficking acts as the necessary tool to help improve the current situation that our wildlife is facing. And it is clear that the members of this intergroup really want the Commission to, at the very least, tackle the ivory trade, the internet trade, the hidden tiger trade, and also come up with a positive list for pets. Well, let me rephrase that. Come up with a very short positive list for pets. just an announcement now for the next intergroup session. The next session will be of this animal welfare intergroup will be held on the 16th of December. This will be my last intergroup meeting as a president of this intergroup, because our intergroup's rules of procedure foresee a change during the midterm, and then on the 16th we will appoint a new president as well. The main topic of this meeting will be this on the structural breaches of the regulation 1/2005 on the transportation of unweaned calves. Caroline Rowley of the Ethical Farming Ireland and Nicola Glenn of Eyes on Animals will give the presentations and on this issue, and will also present a short film on the transportation of these baby animals. And as you all know, this will also be an important part of the report of the Inquiry Committee on Live Animal Transport that will be voted on the plenary in the plenary session of January. And next Tuesday, on the 30th of November, from 12, I think, until 2, there will be an action of several NGOs in front of the European Parliament in Brussels to ask the members of the Animal Transport Committee to vote for strong measures to limit the transport of live animals. So I hope to see you all there or at the next intergroup meeting on the 16th of December. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.